think we are live. We have our studio audience with us tonight. And tonight we are going to talk about degeneracy in the 21st century.
Oh, we about to piss people off again.
Welcome to the Sacred Stew. I am your host, James, and this is my co host, Anthony. And you have arrived at your final destination for anything that has to do with Germanic heathenry, theology, culture, history, lore, whatever it is that is Germanic in nature, we like to discuss. So tonight we are going to be talking about community building, and it's going to be a several part series that we go into because this a very large conversation, but tonight we're going to begin that conversation. Before we do, though, I'd like to check in with my co-host here, Anthony. I'm assuming things have been going well for you. You've probably been hit by this snowmageddon that we've had here in the Great Pacific Northwest over the last week. Have you been homebound, stuck at home?
Oh yeah, man. Thursday night into Friday, it looked like the start of one of those zombie apocalypse movies. Cars all over the road, nobody moving. We got like 6 inches of snow, and that's like unheard of in Portland.
Yeah. It's funny because whenever there's just like even a threat of light dusting, everyone in like the Portland area just runs to the stores and starts stocking up with like 2 weeks worth of food for the event that it is the snowpocalypse.
Yeah, Portland will shut down over a quarter inch.
Yeah. Well, where I lived, we've gotten quite a bit of snow. I've been stuck up at my house for about 4 days now at the time of this recording. I am going to try to risk going in tomorrow, even though it is supposed to snow some more tonight. But I'm going to see if I can make it down this great big hill that I live on with my snow chains on and take that risk to make it to work. But other than being locked up in your house, I assume you've had a lot of time to kind of think about this subject that we've been discussing over the last couple weeks and moving forward. I don't really want to focus a lot on our last episode that we did, which was a really big episode. We got a lot of feedback, a lot of conversations flowing from it, and I don't want to take up a lot of time talking about it. But was there anything about our last episode that you just wanted to kind of touch up on, conversation-wise?
Outside of a singular comment, which ruffled a lot of feathers, I think we made a lot of really good points as far as things we see that are wrong in the broader community. We specifically called out certain people, certain organizations, and that was not meant as an attack on the folk at all. That was not even meant as an attack to members of these groups or organizations. It says in one of the things that we are taught in this tradition is that when we see evil, you speak out against it. And there are some very detrimental thought patterns, trends, and words that have been put out. And because we have a voice and a platform, even though it's smaller than some, we felt a responsibility to call these things out very strongly and very directly. And I think we did that, and I think we got a lot of good conversations started.
Well, yeah, no, there was definitely a lot of conversation started. The one thing that I would just kind of touch up on, and then we can kind of move this conversation along. is a lot of people had a lot of feedback. Specifically, I had people of other organizations contacting me, you know, with information about their organization and how they want to make sure that it's clear that they're not associated with certain orgs. So, first, I did want to mention that because one of the criticisms was essentially we didn't go deep enough into the history of Asatru here in the United States, at least, or even around the world. I certainly wasn't trying to give a big, in-depth history of these things, just a small glance over it to connect some really important dots through that transition. One of the big points that somebody raised with me is that, you know, before these specific individuals that we had a discussion about in the last episode, was that there was other people and there were other groups that were somewhat self-organized or insular, as the term is, that existed, and which is a true statement. A lot of those groups, though, that did exist, they were pretty new agey. A lot of them kind of practiced a Wiccan style approach to the faith. But there were groups of people that existed that were trying to practice a traditional faith. They just lacked a lot of information during that time and age. So I definitely want to give kudos to every single person, whether their names are known or not, for forging a path forward for us. Because even among the names that we mentioned last week, if a lot of these individuals didn't do the groundwork, a lot of people today wouldn't have found the faith and reconnected with their ancestors and the gods of our folk. So we always want to honor them. We always want to honor anybody that does whatever they can to bring our religion and our practice forward, and move it along in its development in its natural course. So with that said, I would like to move on now. Anthony, community building. This is probably going to be one of the hottest topics that we talk about because there's a lot of people out there that are, when we've mentioned it before, solitary practitioners, and we've given practical advice about connecting with people, different orgs and stuff like that. But as we start breaking down community building, we have to understand that there's different, I guess you can call them concentric circles of building that needs to happen. That first concentric circle sort of begins with the individual. What would you say would be the number one thing? Because there's a lot of things that we can put up in a list, but for the individual that is seeking to reestablish this faith in their life that has no community, what would be, in your view, the number one thing that that individual could do? And it doesn't have to be just one word or a sentence, but give us an idea here, a concept for somebody to follow along with.
Well, I think the very first thing that comes to mind, and it's simple in concept, but can be hard in practice, is being the kind of individual that can be a part of a group. One of the, through social media, other cultural influences, and, modern education, we are taught from very young that, we are an individual first and foremost, that the world essentially needs to conform around us. And that just isn't the case. And when we're an individual, isolated, we are at our weakest point. We gain strength through being a part of a community. And I do not mean to attack anybody or degrade anybody that is a solo practitioner, but one thing that I hear a lot from people that choose to be a solo practitioner is a lot of trash talking about groups out there. And it's various. Like these types of people, generally speaking, that I have come across, they have something bad to say about any group, whether it's a universalist group, a folkish group, a new age group, a reconstructionist group, anywhere in between those. And to a point, I wonder, is it the group that is it these groups that are the problem for this individual, or is the individual a problem for the groups? Because kind of touching on Mark Pereira's video about a hard and a soft religion, if you're approaching this as a soft religion, that the religion, the theology, and the worldview needs to conform to what you think it should be, you're going to run into a lot of problems finding a group, because there are a lot of people that are gaining the understanding that they need to mold themselves to the religion, to the theology, to the worldview. And, you know, a lot of people talk about things around the gods, virtues, social concepts. But one thing that is never talked about is when somebody was not a part of a group, it was a death sentence, whether they were outlawed or whatever. To not be a part of a group was a death sentence. Now, in the modern age, you know, we can be completely isolated from groups, but still have a job, still be able to take care of ourselves. But a big part of our religion is the community. You can be a solo practitioner, but to get the full benefits of the spiritual practice, it is meant to be practiced as a group. So, to cut my rant and to keep it simple, starting with the individual, they need to be open to learning new things and becoming somebody that would be a benefit to any group. It doesn't have to be a particular group, but just somebody that can contribute value and allow themselves to get value from a kindred, a tribe, an organization, whatever it's going to be for them.
On an individual level, there is, you know, what you were sort of hinting at there with being a person of value that brings value to the table for whatever group that you start with. I think that what is really at the root of that is the personal ideals that an individual has and manifests in their life. And a lot of this has to do with something that we've said in the past of, you know, having a proper worldview. There's a saying, and we posted this on our Telegram channel in the Sacred Stew chat, but about right thought without right action is meaningless. So there's a lot that goes along with that, because a lot of people have these ideals in their minds and they don't know how to manifest those ideals. And a lot of it is because as a culture and society in today's modern world, as you mentioned, we are brainwashed in our education systems, social media platforms, television networks. We're just bombarded with degeneracy all around us. So the moral view of a lot of people has been tarnished, where their concepts of right and wrong are really blurred. And so in my view, it takes a person to step back And I think a lot of people are, because there is an awakening happening among the folk where we are waking up, we are seeing the degeneracy of our society, we're seeing the attack on our folk itself directly, and they're waking up to this, but people don't know, how to actually live a life with all of this degeneracy around them, where they can manifest the ideals that they have in their mind. Does any of that make sense, Anthony?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I don't want to use the term "the road to hell is paved with good intentions." I think that's part of it, but one, I've made a lot of bad decisions in my life, and I had to pay the consequences for those. And it got to a point where I finally had to start telling people that I don't need you to tell me what not to do. I need you to show me what to do. And I think that's what a lot of these community building conversations are going to be moving forward. Because just to, touch on our last episode for just a moment, we did that list of what's not heathen, what's not going to work. Well, now we're moving forward, you, me, other people of influence out there in the circle, in the broader circles, we've talked about what could be, but now we got to start talking about how we get there, and, what it's going to take from the individual up to groups, of any varying size.
Yeah, no, good point. And here's the thing is like, and this hones in a little bit about, is it the group or is it the individual? And it being sort of both is, traditionally, when we look back over the last 100 years of various sorts of organizations that have popped up, whether it's modern day Asatru organizations, or even ones that were around 100 years ago, in various shapes and forms, for example, like the Theosophical Society or something. No matter what the group was, what we see is a tendency to have a top-down structure of the organization, where the organization itself has essentially a persona or a person in place that is the quote-unquote institutional leader for that organization. Now, I think this is a really important thing for us to examine, because historically, our folk, we've never operated that way. We've never operated from a hierarchical structure from the top down, except at a tribal level. So, but even within those tribal levels, there was a representation of different clans or houses that were a part of that tribe, where they had say in the matters that would come before them. So, what we are going to begin doing, and there's various organizations, or I guess I should say regional organizations that are working together, is we are trying to put together a reestablishment of our traditional culture by starting from the bottom up. That our faith in our communities begins with each individual, and building concentric circles around that individual in their lives. So, and then connecting these concentric circles with a wider range or wider group of folk, to build, hopefully one day, a nation of Teutonic people, once again, that practice the authentic and traditional forms of our religion, and actually build real communities that can function as a unique culture within society. So, beginning with the individual, because we say faith, family, folk, that there is a concentric circle of responsibility that happens with one of those things, with each one of those things, that encompasses our entire realm of our religion and our culture itself. The faith, comes down to the individual, their belief. And as I've mentioned before, we've been damaged. So the real treasure of what we're building for isn't so much the adult individual, but the children are the real treasure trove in this. The children that will be raising in this faith. So on an individual level, if you're an adult in today's society that has a inclination to the practicing your ancestral faith, is to learn as much as you can about what that ancestral faith is. Seek knowledge. B is to learn as much as you can about your own family, which would include, reconnecting or mending family ties with your immediate and even distant family members, and learning the history of your family. Our faith is one of our ancestors, of those that have come before us, and we are moving forward today. And if you're not able to even have good relationships with your own family, if you're not able to understand the history of your family, and if you're not able to understand the history of our religion in the most simplest, basic ways, it's going to be very difficult for you to assimilate with others that do have that understanding and are trying to establish a broader community. So you get back to the point of mending yourself or molding yourself in a way that that is conducive to assimilate to the actual customs and cultures and the practices of our faith.
Yeah, so just kind of touching on some of that, I think a lot of people, especially in the beginning, get too caught up in trying to do everything right from the jump. And whatever it is that got you to the point of essentially converting back to your ancestral ways, or, for the people that were atheists out there, really coming into a spirituality at all, just doing something is the first step. You got to do something before you're able to really do it right. And we get better when we surround ourselves with people that are doing the same thing. So the bottom up structure, I think, has a lot more benefits than the top down structure. You got one person saying this is what it is. And in the bottom down or the bottom up structure, there's a lot more room for an organic growth, and that's going to have its own struggles. But then touching on, raising our children like this in our tradition, when we do this, one of the biggest benefits, not just to the parents, but to the children and future generations, is they won't have the spiritual baggage that 99% of us have. We can teach them early to identify the propaganda, to identify those influences and influencers that are pushing things on them that are detrimental to themselves, to their families, to the faith, and to the folk. Things that the majority of us, we weren't taught when we were younger. We had to stumble through and bump our heads, to even start getting an inclination of what's what.
No, that's exactly it. And the one thing that I would point out, because I don't want it to seem really superficial in how people think about the concept of the top down structure versus the bottom up structure, is because there's obviously going to be ways that the faith is practiced. And as we defined in our episode last week about, what is not heathen, these are important lines for us to kind of draw in the sand, that there's a certain corpus of beliefs that are not acceptable, to our traditional, or even honest to our traditional Germanic faith. But the benefit of the bottom down the bottom up structure is the reestablishment of actual familial clans, the clan system of our folk that we've known for millennia, that everything revolves around the family. To break this chain of independence that is actually holding us down and dividing us, because we have all the chiefs and not enough Indians, as the saying goes. Everybody wants to be a leader, and by building it up from the bottom up structure, you start to build conformity, because now you have families that hold certain beliefs, and you have communities of families that begin to share beliefs whenever they are regionally local to themselves. So you see an organic growth of the spirituality and faith by doing that. The top-down structure, in comparison, has never worked, especially in today's modern age, because what happens is we see just, this Hoff put up in this location, but all of these people, they have different beliefs. They all have different ways of viewing the religion, maybe some more traditional, some more modern, some more neo-paganist, some more hippy-dippy, as they call it. And there's no conformity or standard of belief within that organization. It's essentially like lumping everybody together because they say, we believe in God. Well, that doesn't define a lot. It doesn't define a lot whenever you are, and it doesn't build cohesion just by unifying around a statement of like, well, we believe in the same gods. That doesn't mean a lot, because we may have a belief in the same deities, but do we actually connect with them in the same way? And that's how you build tradition, not by ordering people to do things a certain way from the top down structure, but by families actually building the tradition of their homes. So that's just one thing I wanted to bring up about, the top down, bottom up comparison, is that the bottom up is a way to start reestablishing our familial clan systems. It begins with the individual. It begins with the family. That family, their house, coming together with other families and houses in a local area, practicing the faith, learning about the faith, doing what they're doing, building their tradition together. And from there, connecting with other clans or kindreds that are in a region to eventually form a tribe. And I don't know if I'll ever see this in my lifetime because I think that we're still a long ways away. But I do have the hopes that one day, maybe my grandchildren or great grandchildren, you know, we'll see a day like this, but that there is a nation of Teutonic folk worshiping our gods in the proper prescribed ways and building cultural communities that represent our people and the ideals that we need to live by. So, with that, though, I want to jump back to something we posted on our Telegram channel yesterday, which has to do with this conversation. And I already sort of mentioned the first couple previously, just a couple minutes ago. But so, what we have posted says, right thought without right action is meaningless. Often we are asked by people how they should start learning and what they should do in their lives to practice our faith. They wonder how to put their ideals into action. Below is a list of things you can start doing immediately to begin your journey. 1. Develop or mend familial ties with your immediate and distant relatives or fam. Why is this important, Anthony?
You already said it pretty eloquently that if we can't have productive, stable relations, even with our own families, how can we hope to have them with other groups of families?
What about people that don't have families though? Because that is a real situation where there are broken homes where people were raised in situations with no families. Should they seek out to mend and heal their familial ties?
Well, see, this is where I'm kind of torn, because there are there's there are some people out there that thrive off of chaos. They've been, hurt, damaged, traumatized beyond a point of repair. And getting or allowing these people back into your life would do significantly more harm than good. So
It's a tough one, yeah, it's a tough one whenever there's a situation where somebody wasn't raised around their family. I would I would still say that a person should do what they can to try to mend and reconnect with their family, um, just to see what's there. People change over time, things happen. A lot of times when if you were from a broken home, in a situation where you're young, it may have been a really bad situation at that time for your immediate family. But as you grow older and more mature and go on with your life, I think that people should reach out to their family. I don't believe in this throwaway religion where, it's just walk away. You just walk away from things. And I've mentioned this before, but my grandfather had a really great saying is the difference between, well, people fight is what he said. People fight, but the difference that separates family from other people is what you do after the fight. And I think that's a really big thing for a lot of people because today, now you have sons and daughters and fathers and mothers walking away from their families. And I think that a lot of people have been guilty of this. I know during my life there's been times where I've walked away just because I felt, there was some type of toxic situation or something that was arising. And there could be valid reasons to walk away. But that doesn't mean that there's not a path back to restoration of that relationship.
I would agree in some cases and disagree in others. to not get too in depth, there are actions that can be taken by somebody, even in family situations, that there is no coming back from, that there is no making right. And we all can think of applicable situations in that sense. But I would encourage people to look at whatever situation it from a broader perspective. There is a difference between, to keep it broad, actual intentional abuse and the parental curve that all parents take. What was your mom, was your dad actually being abusive? And maybe they were. That's a thing. There are messed up parents out there. Or did they maybe go too far in a disciplinary action one or two times, and it's something that enough time has passed, both parties have grown, and they need to reconcile and move on from.
Very well said. All right, moving on to the next one. And again, this is one of the ones that I mentioned earlier. But the second thing that a person can start doing is study and become familiar with their familial history. To me, this is one of the really, really important things for an individual to do to begin the process or the journey of establishing the ancestral faith in their life. We see pictures on the walls in our homes, but how many times do we stop and actually look at them? How many times do we think about the stories of those individuals that are no longer here with us? Their memories carry on generation to generation, and as they pass, they're easily forgotten, especially in a society where there's all these gadgets and things to make us not even pay attention to anything around ourselves. But honoring those that have come before us and recognizing their stories and their histories and the paths that they took in their lives, and that you're the end result of those things, and you represent everything and every decision that led to that point. To me, that's one of the core essential things for people to do. Know where you come from. Know who your family is. Know the history of your family, whether it's how they came to America from England, or what clan they were a part of in Scotland, or what Jarl bloodline flows through your blood from the old Germanic Jarls. Learning those things can make you even just psychologically feel connected to your ancestors. And then as you begin to learn more and more and begin to do specific rituals or things that involve these ancestral spirits or gods, that connection is even stronger and more powerful. Would you add any points to that about studying and becoming familiar with familial history?
I think in a lot of situations these days, that doing that is easier said than done. So, and like, I can speak from a personal example. I've done the 23andMe. I've done my true ancestry to get a deeper dive. but there is no one in any of these databases from me, to anywhere recent. I don't know who my dad is. My mom's side of the family is so dysfunctional, that I've never even met my grandmother. And nobody wants to talk about anything. And all anybody ever says is, well, I don't know. So I think if, you can do that, it's great. But again, it kind of comes back to just doing what you can.
Yeah, doing what you can. And I know you're kind of on the opposite spectrum from me a little bit, because I was raised with a family that did try to instill traditional values in me as a child. Although I was in some of the worst environments that you could put a young soul into. But one thing about my journey, though, is my parents, when I was very young, I was just a baby. We're from the Pacific Northwest region. I was born here. All of my extended family lives here. We have well over 100 years of history in the region. And my parents, being very young at the time of having me, decided to leave all of that behind. And they hitchhiked halfway across the United States and landed in the Midwest. Had my sister when we were in the Midwest. I was still a child. But even though I grew up with my immediate family always around me, and visits to family out here in the Pacific Northwest, I always felt disconnected. I always felt like I missed something really important as part of my life. When I was older, I moved back out here, as did my mother and father and my sister. So we all migrated back where we were originally from, and I was able to interact with my extended family on a much regular basis, and realizing, like they say, like cousins, like immediate cousins, share the same, childhood memories generally as you. That's something that I don't share with my cousins. I share those things with my sister, but I don't share those things with my cousins. So I did find it very hard at trying to connect a little bit, where we're more than just people that knew each other, but we were actually family that had each other's back and could talk to each other about anything. So it can be done. That reestablishment can happen. I've experienced it in my life. So don't give up hope on doing it, Anthony. And the journey, I've been working on my genealogy for almost 30 years now. So, and I slowly make headway. And with technology advancing, although there's a lot of it that's destructive, there are elements that are positive and allow us to understand more and more things as time goes on. So keep the faith that you'll learn more too. Number 3, and again, this is one of the ones I mentioned earlier. Study and become familiar with the lore and the customs of your ancestors. What comes to mind for you with that statement, Anthony?
To me, what it says is that when you go and you read through the Poetic Edda, the Odinist Edda, the Asatru Edda. I don't count the Prose Edda personally, or the sagas. You need to keep your mind open to. You need to keep your mind open to concepts, because it's very easy to read something and try to put modern worldviews and morals and, all that stuff onto the past. But when you're reading these things, you've got to look for the spirit in which they were written, not the spirit in which you're reading it. And it's only through being open to the spirit that it was written in that you're really going to absorb that and, being able to more clearly define what is and what isn't a part of our ancestral tradition.
And I think one of the important reasons to really stress why an individual needs to begin learning about the lore and the customs of our ancestors is because it provides us, each one of us that come from the Teutonic tribes, whether you're Scottish or I will even say Irish because the Norse were very much so in Ireland. But whether you're Scottish, Frankish, German, when we speak of Germanic tribes, we're talking about the broad origin-based group of folk, Anglo-Saxons included. So it provides us, though, when you understand and you read these things and you learn them, it gives you historical context of the history of your folk and ancestors and the corpus of wisdom and knowledge of how we should live our lives to protect ourselves from ill or harm that could come to us individually or within our family or community. And then it also gives us perspective of who we are in the world around us today as individuals, as families, and as communities. And then the most important thing, and this is something that I want to stress here because there's so much black pilling that's happening on the internet today. But when you study the lore and the customs of our folk and you understand that historicity of it and you understand the perspective of who you are in today's moment in the world, it gives you purpose and a destiny to fulfill to move into the future. So that's one of the things and one of the reasons why I feel it's really important as one of the initial 3 steps that an individual does is to begin studying the lore and the customs of our folk. Anything to add to that, Anthony?
Oh no, man! I understand the whole black pill concept. I'm probably half black pilled myself. When so, but again, coming back to what I said before, understanding the spirit of how it was written. The black pill community likes to say we're it's the end of the world. It's the end of the world. That. I would argue every generation has said this world sucks and the next generation is going to kill us. But we keep moving forward. So, and that's one of the big things that I got in reading the lore and the sagas. Even looking at Odin, with everything he knows, he couldn't change. There wasn't much he could change, if anything at all. But he still tried. He still went out and learned what he could and did what he could to get the best result for himself and his people.
And he fulfilled his destiny doing that.
Yes.
All right, number 4. If you are young, this is number 4 of the things that an individual can do to start building community as an individual. Number 4, if you are young, but I should also include even if you're old, that these older, I shouldn't say old, but older than young, you should find a person devoted to our traditional and authentic faith that can be a mentor for you. Someone that you can learn from, that you can bounce ideas off of. And this person should be somebody that you respect, This person should be a person of honor, and they should show and demonstrate a sincere devotion to our ways, to our faith. This is where the community part of the individual starts to come in, because in order for a person to understand, especially if you're new and you're just starting out, there's a lot of information out there, more bad than good. And what you read affects the way that you understand things. And just coming into the faith, a lot of times you may not understand the origins or roots where information comes from. And we've dealt with this topic a lot in a couple episodes, season 2 specifically, that this contributes to a continual propagation of erroneous knowledge about our ancestral traditions. So finding somebody that is practicing a traditional and authentic faith is usually a little bit easier to do than what one may think. And I say that because the people that are practicing a traditional and authentic faith will very much tell you that they're practicing a traditional folk faith versus, like some sort of new age or modern movements or belief system. Maybe you can define that a little bit better or give a little bit more perspective on that. I'm not sure if I'm exactly saying it clear enough where people understand what I mean.
So when I think about what you just said, the people that I have met that practice our traditional faith, they first and foremost, when they're looking to teach somebody, they are looking to build that person, not their ego. A lot of I've been around, different groups and different people, and there are some people out there that when they quote unquote mentor somebody, it is inevitably coming back to they are trying to prove how right they are or how right this other person is. When somebody has a traditional view of our faith, they're teaching what's there. It's looking to build you, not them or somebody else. I can't really say it any better than that.
Well, that's a good way of saying it. And I guess the things to look for are people that are using the sources of our material. We talked a little bit about the epic method in many seasons ago, which has to do with reconstructing our faith in a certain series or hierarchy of books or documents or artifacts that are considered when understanding what the faith is. Because it's really easy to read something and not understand the context of it, especially when you're reading a translation of something. So finding somebody that is able to put context from a source-based material on how we're supposed to live and what the belief systems are is important versus somebody that just tells you to go out in the woods and hug a tree. Would that be a good contrast example of the point you were trying to make, Anthony?
I would also think another good point or another good thing to look for is if somebody says, hold on, let me double check something. Whether it's they're going to go look at a passage from the material, or they're going to go ask they're going to go ask somebody else that they trust. When they're looking to verify and make sure that they're giving you the right information, I definitely feel like that's another, really good sign that you are putting yourself in the hands of somebody that is trying to do right by you.
Well, yes, and then also, and even if like the mentor may not know, or maybe even maybe he or she unintentionally, gives some information to you that isn't always correct. Um, Not looking for perfection in a mentor, but somebody that tries to actually bring the best out of you, highlight deeds of honor, and highlight the greatness of what we're doing and whatever our ancestors have done. That's really one of the key things for me. I was having a discussion with one of our kinsmen here in the region, Mason. Mason, if you're listening, hello. But we were talking about Sumbul, and I think this ties together really well. That, and I've experienced this, and anybody that's been involved in a larger set community probably has experienced something similar. But you get in these circle of people for Sumbul, and where a horn is shared, and they go around, where the things that people are talking about are often really negative things. Things that kind of bring, I don't know, just a sense of despair to people. And it's like they're almost caught stagnant in that despair. For example, somebody may, when we're doing a round for somebody that's passed or something, they may speak about this person in his life, and they may say, well, he was addicted to drugs, but he was a great person, but it's really sad that we lost him. I know he got in, some trouble and this and that, and it's good to remember people, but at the same time, it's important that especially during Sumbul, we should be highlighting the victories, the greatness of individuals or things that we're doing. It's a time to build us in our power in our community when we're doing this ritual, that we're not here to mope around and, hail a god because we won $50 at a slot machine. We're here to highlight the greatness of our gods and the way that they impact our lives for the better, in its totality, or our ancestors or our friends or family that have passed. Let's highlight their great deeds, not their negative ones. That just destroys us. That keeps us down when we do that. So, anyways, I just wanted to say that a mentor should be somebody that is helping you build yourself in your characters so that you are or becoming an honorable person. Number 5 in the list, Anthony. Spiritually connect to your ancestors and the gods of our folk by learning and developing rituals and practices that reestablish and reconnect you to your ancestors and the gods. This may be a daily meditation, or perhaps a memorial in the simplest of fashions. And as one's knowledge increases, by performing bloat and more ceremonial rituals in the properly prescribed traditional way. With everything before it, the 3 things before it, why is this number 5 important?
Well, taking into account that, bloat is how we connect to the gods. Sumbul is, to me, it's how we connect to our ancestors and to the folk around us. But even the smaller rituals, like you talked about the daily meditations or whatever works for you to feel like you're making that connection. The first four, I feel, are the thoughts and the worldviews, like what needs to happen within you to lay a foundation, but learning the rituals and doing and how to do them correctly and other little things to build relations. These are the first steps to actually putting in action to practice the faith, to honor the gods, to honor the ancestors, and to be a part of a community.
You said the key thing, that this is the number of the list here of number 5. This is where you're taking your knowledge and you're putting it into action, into your daily life. And I do want to kind of give some people a little bit of food to eat when thinking about this number 5, because a lot of people are going to say, well, what do I do? What do you mean by meditation? What do you mean by memorial or this and that? So it could be as simple as sitting there for 5-10 minutes thinking about your past grandmother, thinking about the memories that you have with her, thinking about words of wisdom that she gave to you during her life. It could be, taking some of your food and leaving it as an offering to a past family member or to a god or goddess, or even to land spirits themselves or the elves. It could be any of those things, because there's an exchange of energy that's happening as that food is dissipated, and giving them to those, whether it's your family or an entity of some sort, is a way of communing with them and showing the gift for gift exchange that's always been a part of our faith. And then as your knowledge increases in the faith and the rituals and the ways to connect, you can do things like ceremonial bloat that's prescribed for us to do for certain needs, or now that we need protection from. That increases luck in your life. But in the simplest terms, as I said, it can be a meditative moment as you're learning, or memorials of people that have passed. You could think about honor. There's a lot of great books out there that are in the self-character building genre of things, and most of them are just generally right about thinking the thought first and then actualizing those thoughts to make them come into being. So there's a sort of transition that happens there, or a transformation that needs to happen, where we take these thoughts and begin acting them out. And that's how you transform yourself as an individual. So, number 6, build your clan. Build your clan. This is number 6 in the precepts of taking right action for a new person, for an individual. Find a good woman or a good man to marry that you can build a family with. Have children. Raise those children with morals and instill in them knowledge of our way by leading by example. That is going to be one of the core fundamental things for our traditional faith to survive on and continue well into the future is this precept right here, number 6. Because there's no point to practice a faith if you're just practicing it by yourself, when it's a traditional focused faith that's meant to be passed on to the next generation, to carry it on, to carry the flame, keep it going, where there is a coherent and a direct line of descent of knowledge that is continually. This is how we break the disinformation, is that we teach our kids what it is, or else they're going to be relying on other sources to try to figure it out. I don't know if you saw my little series of posts on the Sacred Stew chat about the difference between theology and philosophy, Anthony, but I think it kind of keens in here, because we're talking about doing versus just thinking something. So I want to read this a little bit. So, theology is the presumption of certain beliefs to be true. Some people clasp rather to philosophy, which seeks answers to explain why and how things are. Theology will never satisfy a philosopher, as the philosopher seeks meaning for his life, whereas the theologian already possesses that meaning. So, in my perspective, in the perspective that I have when somebody is an individual practicing solo, and they're not able to pass on a tradition down, this is sort of, and this it's not that individual's fault, because our society and the way that our religion was essentially taken from us, and we were all forced into this Christian conception of everything. So I don't want to lay blame on individuals, but what's happening is you're just seeking meaning for your own self instead of that grander soul that we all share amongst each other. And when you come into knowledge of this, hopefully you'll be inspired to begin, seeking networks and connections with folks to build real community, because it's almost lacking in the true belief of the position of I'm doing something concrete that actually builds for future generations, because that's our purpose and destiny. I hope that makes sense.
Not to be the counter guy, but I don't know, to a certain degree, I think marriage in the modern concept is a little overrated. But it's definitely important to, find a good man or find a good woman and raise healthy kids. And, then touching on the difference between philosophy and theology, I think you hit the nail on the head with theology having a religious base. So some of the questions of, why are we here, or why things are the way they are already answered for us. And when you're coming at things from a philosophical standpoint, my experiences with that is questions don't ever really get answered. There is no really finding things out, because every answer you get, you just have another question that almost seems to, what's the word I'm looking for? Invalidate the answer to the question you just had.
I do want to engage you a little bit about the marriage thing. I don't disagree with the statement about marriage in the terms of how our modern society recognizes it. Especially when we live in an age where there is so many devastated and just traumatically hurt adults that have never even witnessed a good wholesome traditional marriage. They don't have a concept of what that is. But I think that we should devote that to another episode, because that's almost a conversation all by itself. So, number 7 in the precepts for an individual to take action: find community. Seek others that are doing the same as you. Seek people that are learning about their familial history, their lore, and the customs of our people, that are having families and children and raising them with good morals and upbringing. Seek those individuals out, build community with them. If you cannot find anyone, teach your family, teach your friends. You know, this message that we are giving is something that resonates to the very core of our souls. Like, everybody knows that we're speaking the truth. Everybody knows these are the things that you should do. But it's about, actually doing them. Right thought is nothing without right action. And be that person, that inspiration. Once you do get on this path and you start establishing those things where you can start influencing and teaching people, and they see these things being manifested and they think it's beautiful and they want to emulate that. That's what we have to do. So you can, if you have to build a community from scratch like that, you can begin holding study groups. You can plan events or rituals or community gatherings. And this can be just a public thing at first, especially if you don't know somebody. There's a lot of avenues where you can meet people in the public just to begin some sort of group gathering. See where people are at. And just start building there from scratch. Alternatively, if there are just absolutely no local groups in your area and you are not really sure how to build a group, you can relocate to different areas where there are communities that are developed and developing that you can engage with, that you can become a part of. There's the Pacific Northwest Wolfpack here. We represent Washington, Oregon, Idaho, even Montana. We have folk in Montana. And then Alaska, too. We are starting to gather some folk there as well. So we also have the Ermine folk out in the Northeast. Great community, great leaders in the region. We have the Folkish Alliance in Texas. And there's a few other groups throughout the United States that are really wholesome traditional groups that can be connected with. I know in the Pacific Northwest, our region specifically, we have what is called the territorial imperative. Essentially, we want folk to move to our area. We want to build a great, grand community throughout this entire region of just our folk. So if you're on the path and you're looking to join communities, the Northwest is a great place to come for that. You can connect with folk here. You can get involved in communities. It is something that is real. So, would you add anything to that, Anthony?
Nothing that's not political.
Yeah, let's stay away from that for now.
Yeah. As soon as he said come to the Pacific Northwest, I had to bite my lip. Like yes, please, but
yes, but. All right, number 8. Let's move on. And this is essentially kind of ties it all up here is, avoid things which morally or physically cause harm to you, your family, and the folk around you. That should just be understood. If you have a gambling addiction, stay away from gambling. If you have an alcohol addiction, maybe you don't realize you do, but you just don't get along with your family, and you so happen to drink a couple cases of beer a day, maybe examine that. Take a look at the things in your life that are affecting your relationship with other people, and also the path in your life as an individual. Can you, when the year is done, can you look back over the past year that you just lived through and say that where you stand today is better than where you were a year ago? That's a question that I ask myself almost all the time, almost every year. In fact, I do ask myself that question every year. am I better off today than I was a year from then? And that's how I gauge my advancement in my own personal life, in my family, in the community that I'm a part of. And I think it would serve everybody well to begin recognizing when they answer that question as, no, I'm not better off today than I was last year, to introspectively begin analyzing why that is. What are the things that caused your life to be worse off? And then eliminating those things. Again, it gets back to mending familial ties with your family and building those relationships up.
I mean, I would just add, it seems like a lot of our ancestors had a gambling addiction, but we won't go too far into that today.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's, and I've said this a couple times, like what this definitely comes back to is the things that you do in your life do not just affect you, whether you want to acknowledge that or not. And it can be really hard to look at those darker aspects of yourself that aren't serving you, your family, or your folk, and really try to rein those in and eliminate them to the best of your abilities. One of the benefits of having a community is you don't have to deal with those types of issues all by yourself. And, especially when you're starting to dig out those proverbial skeletons from the closet, don't be too hard on yourself. Don't be your own worst critic. Just, take what you can. You're not going to be perfect. None of us ever are, and just do what you can. You're going to stumble, you're going to fall along the way. But the biggest honor, to me at least, in that whole process is just getting back up and getting back to it.
Yeah, and I would add to that is the importance of taking accountability or responsibility for your life path. That you are not just simply giving in to the whims of the forces of the ocean, but you're swimming a course to survive and move forward and make it back to land. That even if you don't succeed at the end, you struggled and strive to reach that goal. That's one of the most important things and to do that, you have to take accountability, take responsibility for your life, the things that happen around you. When you examine and you find deficiencies, improve and correct. Part of this will come with having, a good mentor or a good group of friends around you that advise you of good things, advise you in matters of your life. When you seek advice, a honorable way to practice something or do something or make a decision on something. So seek advice from older people, especially if you're younger. Life experience is very, very important. I know as a child myself, I reached a point where I thought my friends were everything, and then it took quite a few years of my life to realize that everything my family told me about the family being everything was so much more true. So the same is true about people that are a little bit older than you. They have a little bit more life experience, insight, and ability to see patterns in life, and usually offer the best advice. Would you add any more to that, Anthony?
Well, I mean, the only thing that I can add is I can't speak for women, but I know especially for men, it is super important to have somebody in your life that you allow at least this one person to call you on your crap. To be able to to have that one person in your life that can call you out and bring your attention to negative and destructive things that you might not recognize, and you have to be able to respect yourself and this person enough to not take it as a personal attack, but look at it as somebody that is looking out for you and is identifying something that's holding you back. You know, like talking about community building. I mean, we met at a random lunch with one mutual friend, but a couple other random people, and we just hit it off. And, you know, not going to throw your age out there, but you're a little bit older than I am. And, you know, this mentor relationship is kind of what I've gotten from you. You know, we don't agree on everything, but if I'm out of pocket, you call me on my crap. And, you know, I have definitely benefited from that. And I would encourage other people to seek the same.
Well, I feel honored, Anthony. As they say, a true friend is the friend that will tell you the truth even when the words pierce your heart. So that's something that I firmly believe in, that a true friend is going to tell you when you're in the wrong. And if you don't have somebody there that's doing that, and everybody around you is just always yes men, and you may want to re-examine, you know, your circle of advisors. So
I was going to say, if you don't have at least one friend that challenges you, you're kind of missing out.
Oh yeah, there's no free passes in life, and your friends shouldn't give you one either. So number 9, and I kind of said this earlier, but it's important in these precepts of taking right action for an individual, is remember it's faith, family, folk. These concentric circles are important. You must be true to yourself before you can ever be true to your family or folk. Being true to yourself means having proper knowledge in our ways and a conviction to live by our precepts actively. If you cannot be true to yourself in regards to your faith, one can never be true to their family or folk. So it all begins with you as an individual. And it all starts with you taking right action. And so those are the 9 precepts of taking right action that we have written about on our Telegram channel. I think it's really good. It was shared around a lot just in one day. There was a lot of people that view that message. So hopefully this information is disseminating, because we are trying to disseminate a traditional view and perspective and bring folk home and connect with their ancestors, their gods, and the communities around them. Would you add any precepts to this? Is there something that's missed in this that's fundamental for an individual, Anthony?
The 10th unnamed precept, don't embrace degenerate crap.
Well, yeah, but that kind of goes back to number 8, avoid things which morally or physically cause harm to you.
Well, I mean, yes, absolutely correct. Sometimes you just got to spill it out simply. You know, because there are people today that, in embracing themselves, quote unquote, they destroy themselves and the people around them. And a lot of times it can feel right even though it's wrong. So when you're embracing you in the context of embracing yourself, as far as these 9 precepts are concerned, it's very important to embrace those parts of yourself that build you, build the faith, the family, the folk, and to allow those parts of you that don't do that to dissolve. Trying to not be overly sensational on this one.
Come on, you're the sensational guy, Anthony. You're supposed to always been sensational.
Yes, but we're on YouTube and I have to behave to a certain extent.
I want to end this episode just by saying that, and I want to hone in on like people that are just learning, because when we talk about community building, we begin with the individual, and hopefully this episode is about the individual in the greater picture of the conversation of building towards a community, and that we've given you steps to do in your own personal lives that you can begin doing right away to begin this whole journey. But one of the most important aspects, and they're all very important in those 9 precepts, but one that we kind of went on about great length is the mentor part of this, is that it's important that the person that you are seeking information from, even if it is an older person, that you want to seek out people that are knowledgeable in the customs and traditions of our folk. I don't know if I want to go any further than that, but I just did want to point that out one more time about, seeking the mentor, because that is a huge thing. A good mentor is not easily found. It's not going to be the first person that you run across on the street, most likely. But even though you and I just met randomly, Anthony, but sometimes it takes a little time to find that right person, and sometimes you don't know it until that relationship just naturally develops itself. So seek knowledge always, and seek wisdom always. If you don't follow The Sacred Stew, you can follow us on Telegram. We have a channel there. If you have questions, you can always reach out, comment on any of our posts. We're also on YouTube, Anchor.fm, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and a few other ones out there. We're most active in Telegram as far as communicating with people. So if you do want to chat, feel free. If you don't have Telegram, download the app. Just search in the search bar, The Sacred Stew. You'll find us. Same with any of the other. You can even Google us. Google The Sacred Stew and find an avenue to reach out if you have questions, comments, anything like that. Anyways, we appreciate everybody that listens. This channel is growing. It is a lot larger than even what numbers show, on our channels and chats. We get a lot more contact from people. A lot of discussions happen behind closed doors in different groups and such. And we appreciate that everyone is sharing this content, talking about it. The conversations that we're having are very important for our folk moving into the future and the reestablishment of our traditional Teutonic faith. And I love all of you guys, and I hope that the words that we gave to you tonight and in any episode that you listen to touches part of your soul, and you feel it, and it encourages you and helps you to take right action. So with that, I'm going to check out for the night. Anthony, did you want to close us up?
This has been The Sacred Stew. I am Anthony. My co-host is James. Y'all have a good night.